I'm so
I'm
sorry.
sorry, Emily. We forgot to press record, but we just pressed it.
Okay,
Okay,
should
here you go.
okay. From one man, he created all the nations throughout the whole earth. He decided beforehand when they should rise and fall, and he determined their boundaries. His purpose was for the nations to seek after God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, though he is not far from any of us.
Okay, thank you for reading that. So, um, just for those of you guys that are on line watching, we are on May 17th, John 9, 1 through 41. I'll do like maybe a brief recap to get us caught up because I've been teaching for a few minutes now. But what she just read was how he made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the earth. And this is very interesting. Like, if you ever have doubts about, you know, your plan, like the plan that God has for you in your life, if you ever have doubts of God, why am I here? What are you doing? God, you're not a mistake. You didn't just happen. God brought about every nation from one blood, and it says he has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. God put you in time where he wanted you in time, meaning he could have put you back in Abraham's day, David's day, but he has put you in this time. 2025 is where he's put you. He also determined not only your pre-appointed time, but the boundaries of your dwelling. So he put you in California, New Jersey, Maine, wherever you landed in life, God put you there. So there is an absolute purpose to everything God does surrounding your life. So just to get everybody caught up online, we've been learning about the blind man who was born blind, and how the disciples were like, why did this happen? And so we were talking about the whys, that why do bad things happen to people. We've briefly mentioned really hard things like being molested or raped or family divorce, and just going through hard things in life, and how the Pharisees at the time really bred within the people that if you were born with a defect, then there was a sin, a specific sin that took place in either the unborn baby's life before it was born, or the parents sinned. And while at the end of the day, it does all point to sin because of the fallen, sinful world that we live in, that the majority of time, it's not a specific sin that somebody committed. Sometimes birth defects do come from parents' sin, but that is not the case with this that we're reading. And so the main thing that you should know, those of you guys on the YouTube channel, is that Jesus directs the question. He moves the question away from why. Like, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to him? Why am I going through this? And he moves it away from why to what can God do in this? And so we want to see our circumstances through God's eye, because we can't control our circumstances. Bad things do happen to good people, bad things happen to innocent people. And we cannot control our circumstances, but we can control how we respond in them. So that just sort of gets you caught up. Um, so Jesus saying it's not because of this man's sin. And then, this happened so that the power of God could be seen in him. So, just getting back on track here. Um, Jesus chose for this man to be healed at this time. So then he's picked us, right? So that verse that I was just talking about, he's picked us to live in this day and age and this time. And there, like, some things God may not fix or heal, but that doesn't mean that we don't give up. Like, we are not called to just give up and give in. We're called to continue to serve the Lord, because just like the man that I mentioned in the book of Acts, who Jesus passed by. Anytime he went through the temple, Jesus passed by him, but he doesn't get healed until we see in the book of Acts with Peter and John. So we trust the Lord. We trust the Lord with our circumstances. You have to trust the Lord with what takes place in your life, the bad and the good. So the disciples, they are a picture of Job's friends. They're really like Job's friends because Job was like, you must have messed up somewhere, Job. Like this, Job was completely innocent and righteous. And yet his friends were like, you must have done something wrong. And that is like, we are prone to think that way. We're prone to go towards that way of thinking. So we should direct our thoughts towards this happened so that the power of God could be seen in him. Let me just look. So this should change how we view our weaknesses. Jesus submits the truth, which is contrary to their belief. And so he says we must quickly carry out the tasks assigned to us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. And so that whole night and day statement that Jesus makes, it was day while Jesus lived on earth. And so he had, you guys know how quickly days go, and he had his moment in time to do the works that the Lord sent him to do. And that's what he's referring to. And so he's going to heal this man. In verse 6, we see something so out of the ordinary for Jesus. He spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. Things to know about Jesus. Jesus initiated this whole thing. It started out by saying that as Jesus was walking along, he saw the blind man. He saw the blind beggar, man blind from birth. Jesus saw him. We have no record that the blind man heard Jesus coming and called out for him. We have seen that in other accounts where blind men heard Jesus was coming and said, come on over here and heal me. We don't have anything like that from this blind beggar. We have Jesus being the initiator. We have the disciples, asking the question, and we have Jesus going over to him, and then we see him do something out of what his ordinary method. And so Jesus changes his method here because power is not in a method. The power is in God. Okay, the ability to be healed, the power is in the Lord and not in some sort of method. And mankind would try to create a method for healing. In fact, they have through programs that are godless and steps and medication and methadone maintenance and fill in the blank. There's so many things that mankind has tried to create as a method to healing. So Jesus spits on the ground, he makes mud, and he spread mud over the blind eyes. So even though Jesus changed his method on earth, like his earthly ministry here, this is still in character with God because it was God who took dust of the earth to bring about man. When God was creating and doing the 6 days of creation and going through everything, when he created man on the 6th day, he took dust of the earth and formed man. Just a really cool thing that's very consistent with the character of God. So he put the mud on the guy's eyes, and the guy could have been offended. The disciples could have been like, what are you doing? Rubbing mud in this man's eyes. The man could have been offended at the way that God did his healing. He could have been like, gross. Okay, that's disgusting. To be spit upon in the Jewish culture would make you unclean. But this man had been treated like he was unclean his entire life. And he had been treated like an outcast, and he was a beggar. Okay, and he's even treated a certain way by his parents. Like even his parents succumbed to the pressures of the world. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but that he could have taken offense at Jesus spitting if he knew, I'm suggesting that he knew Jesus spit on the ground. But even so, like the gospel of Christ is offensive to people. The gospel offends. and can be hard to receive when you're confronted with sin and when you're told that you're a sinner. Jesus does this, puts the mud on the man's eyes, and then tells him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. I think that might be my favorite line of the whole section today. He went, he washed, he came back seeing. This man was challenged with faith-filled action, obedience. This healing specifically had in obedience, a call to obedience involved in it. Jesus would speak and heal people. Jesus would touch and heal people. Here, he makes the mud, puts it on the guy's face, and maybe that was to motivate his obedience. Because if he had just said to the guy, go wash in the pool of Siloam, I wonder if the man would have. This is a man. He is maybe stuck in his ways a little bit. Used to being a beggar his whole life. Guys, please think about it. Born this way, born blind. And so this was his whole life. And we can be so stuck and so comfortable in a way of life that is not God's intent for us. We can be comfortable depressed. Do you guys know that? You can be comfortable in misery. You can be so used to misery and depression that you don't step into the freedom and the change that the Lord has for you. And so maybe one of the reasons that God did this was to help motivate obedience. And I love that about the Lord, because the Lord knows what each individual needs. And he knows that sometimes there's those of us that we need a little motivation for obedience. There's this awesome story that I love teaching on in the Old Testament. We're not going to go there. I considered us going there together, but just going to stay on point with the scriptures today. But I will just reference it here, and it is the leper of Nan, not of Nan. It was the leper. Gosh, I cannot remember right now where he was from. But anyways, he was not Jew. He was a Gentile. He was a leper. He was a commander of an army, and but he had leprosy. He was well respected by his king, by his soldiers. He had a wife, but he was a leper. So he had all this power, position, honor, respect, but he was a leper. Okay, just very similar. We can pull similarities from this man. And so, just this bad thing happened to Naaman, okay, this guy. And so he hears that the prophets in Jerusalem in Israel can heal him. So he goes to get healed. He goes, and the prophet doesn't even come outside of his door, doesn't come outside of his house. But the prophet sends his servant and says, go tell Naaman to go dip in the Jordan 7 times, I believe it was. So the servant goes and delivers the message. Naaman, go dip in the Jordan 7 times. Naaman is angry. He goes away wrathful. He's just angry because, number one, the prophet didn't come out. And his expectation, he says, surely I thought that the prophet would come out and wave his hands in the air and call upon the name of God and I would be healed. That was Naaman's answer. His healing didn't come how he thought it was going to come. And it required trust and obedience. It required follow through. It wasn't, again, he didn't even get to be in the prophet's presence. Okay. And so Naaman almost didn't get healed, but thankfully his servants talked some sense into him and said, Master, if he had told you to do something awesome, like go climb a mountain, wouldn't you have done it? And so Naaman ends up going and dipping in the Jordan, and Naaman is healed. And it even said that his flesh was like a youth. Like, that's cool. That is amazing. And so that was this action, this faith-filled action that was required of Naaman. And it's a similar thing here. There's a challenge with obedience. But with this guy, Jesus didn't just say, go wash in Siloam. I don't know if that means that maybe Jesus knew something about this man that we don't know, that the scriptures don't tell us, that he needed some extra motivation, to follow through with obedience. And that's how good our God is. That is how merciful, that is how gracious, because had he not put the mud in his eyes, maybe he never would have gone to be healed. But he helps motivate us to obedience. And obedience works hand in hand with faith and is the action of faith. It's what shows our faith, is when we have it accompanied by action. And so he goes and he came back seeing. So we don't know how long it took him to get there. You know, again, he's blind. And that's interesting to think about. You know, God didn't help him get there. Like Jesus didn't take him by the hand and walk him there, you guys. Jesus gave him a direction and said, go, like, go and wash yourself. And sometimes it's like, again, it might be a hard road. We know that I know God can do anything. Like he can make miracles happen. He can heal you from your past. He can, um, gosh, he can do whatever, and he can bring about our healing however he desires. I know for me in my life, there was hurts. I had major hurts in my life as a kid, things that just brought baggage into my life and into my marriage. I had so much baggage that would interfere with my marriage. I've shared this with you guys. I don't know, of course, everybody online and who's heard teachings before, but just from the things that I suffered as a child, and then even beyond that, the choices I made as a young adult, having an abortion, I had so much baggage with intimacy. And when I got married, it was such a fear of mine. And the Lord didn't just heal me, the Lord did not just make things easy. My husband and we stayed pure till we were married. And then there were struggles. There was major struggles that within the first few months caused us to really, like, our foundation was being shaken. And we were talking about divorce, and it was really a very, very trying time. And I would pray and I would say, why, Lord? Why did this happen? Like we waited, we did everything right. And, and I would say, why? And I had to really move from that, just like we see happening here. And I had to stop asking the Lord why. It was creating so much doubt for me on God's character. And I know God to be good. And I know him. I know who he is. And so then Adam would tell me where the problem would start, that the problem would start in my mind. Adam would say to me, you're believing lies about yourself. You are believing that this is dirty, like you're believing that this is bad, that this is unholy. And because I had those kinds of thoughts, it would create feelings. Like your thought life does produce feelings. If you guys don't know that, you should. What you think will produce feelings, it will affect your way of life. And I rejected what my husband said at first. I would say, no, you don't understand. And then one day after suffering, like after just struggles in marriage and suffering and no fruit, the Lord like woke me up because I was like, why are you not helping? And he said, I've been helping. You're rejecting my help. I gave you your husband. Listen to what he says. And Adam was right all along. And it took some work on my end. I had to choose to obey and believe what Adam was saying. I said, okay, I'm sorry. Like, what do I do? You're right. It's starting in my head. The battle's starting in my head. What do I do? And he would say, you have to think the truth. You have to fight with truth. You know what to do. You did this with your drug addiction. You did this. There's no different. It's just packaged up differently. You have to speak truth. And so I would then just hold on to, this is good, this is pure. And I had the things in my arsenal that I would fight with. And you know what? Change happened, healing came, and crazy transformation in my marriage took place. Okay, and that's just one example. So you guys, like I share that. That's not really hard for me to share. I share a lot with women. It's a big part of my testimony. But it is a very private part of Adam and I's life that I share, only so that you can take it and think of your own life and the hurts and the heartaches and the whys and say, okay, God, what can you do in this? How do you want me to be thinking towards this? How can I change my mentality? I'm not a victim. Yes, this was hard. This stinks, but you're good. And I want to be set free. I want to be healed. So, and then don't be surprised if God calls you through simple obedience. I do know women who say, you know what, God healed me. I came to Christ and I was healed. That's cool. That's awesome. I love that for so many people. And it's just not the case with everybody. And like we see here, Jesus doesn't have a solid method to his healing. So he does things different with all of us. Okay. So don't be surprised if Jesus is like, just follow me, trust me, obey me. So that's what we see. Verse 8 says his neighbors and others, sorry, who were with him, his neighbors and others, who knew him as a blind beggar, asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? So he comes back and he comes back seeing. And this is such a picture of when his eyes are opened, it changed the way he looked. Just imagine somebody blind. He was probably sitting down a lot, begging. You guys know, I'm sure the homelessness in America is everywhere. It's pretty big in Maine. You can't really drive too far into Brewer, Bangor, and there's homeless people on every corner, and they have their cardboard things and it tells you their story. Some of them say veteran and homeless, and some of them say, I have a family and I'm homeless. And I'm not sure that they're all being truthful, but anyways, they have their story and they're all just why you should give to them. And so here's this blind beggar, and I'm sure he held out his cup or whatever, and he would call out and say, help me, like I'm blind, and whatever he would say to invoke compassion and try to get people to give to him. So people knew him. So I believe this man was older, okay, because he'd been around a while. His neighbors and others knew him as the blind beggar. And so that's this label, the blind beggar. Okay, that's his label that the world put on him, which we all have. We all have certain labels that we had been given. And so they're asking each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? And some said he was, and others says, no, it just looked like him. And that's so interesting because with his eyes opened, can you imagine that? I mean, come on, step into his life. Okay, he was blind for, let's just say 40 years, blind, 30, 50 years, whatever, never had seen. And then all of a sudden he sees when he's at that pool washing, and when he comes up, how did he even make it back home? This is probably so bad, but it'd be like you're tripping. You know what I mean? You would just be like looking at everything like a tree. Literally would just think of somebody who's like tripping, Sorry, forgive me if that's a horrible analogy, but you would just be so like enthralled with everything that you see. I'm just like, how did he even make it back? I would just be looking at everything around me. But he goes back and his countenance had changed. Okay, his affect, he's happy, he's joyful. He goes back home. So that just having that freedom, just having that joy from healing changed the way he looked so that people are confused. People are like, I don't know if that's him. Is that really him? That just looks like him. So too, it is the same for those of you who have been healed and set free from your bondage and addiction. Like there is a beautiful countenance that the Lord gives that comes from just his presence alone, but also from the work that he does in our lives. There's this beautiful presence, countenance that he gives us. And so there's confusion and they're like, I don't know if that's him or not. So they ask him, who healed you? They say, what happened? And he told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and washed and now I can see. Look at this beautiful little testimony. the man they call Jesus. And you got to pay attention to everything going on from this point on because he's going to draw a crowd. So now his neighbors and friends are like, what happened? And he's like, well, the man they call Jesus. And so you got to watch his testimony. His testimony changes with every encounter from people. His testimony begins to change and it gets refined. It's a really cool thing. So at first, he's like, well, the man they call Jesus made mud, told me to go do this. So I did it. They say, where is he now? And he says, I don't know. He didn't see Jesus's face, you guys. He didn't get that chance to see Jesus's face. Again, Jesus didn't go with him. He says, I don't know. Then they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud and healed him. The Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, he put the mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see. So he tells the Pharisees his testimony. Some of the Pharisees say, this man, Jesus, is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath. Others say, but how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was deep division of opinion among them. And such is the case. There, people will always be divided and a deep division even over who is Jesus. Okay. And so the Pharisees, they come back in 17 and they again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, what is your opinion about this man who healed you? This is now the third time that we have recorded that he gets an opportunity to tell his story or to tell his thoughts, I should say. The man replies, I think he must be a prophet. The Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and could now see. So they call his parents and they asked him, is this your son? Was he born blind? If so, how can he now see? Now, please, there's a whole nother section of this story just in the parent's life because to be a parent, they didn't have, even in my day, even when my mom was pregnant with me, she had no idea what I was going to be. Not because she wanted to be surprised, but because the technology didn't exist yet to tell whether you were going to be a girl or a boy. Okay, so I have all blue blankets because I have an older sister. So they just assumed that I was going to be a girl. So all my blankets are blue, which is cool because I have lots of boys. But anyways, just imagine, I say that so that you can like step in, those of you guys that are moms, you can think about this on a little more personal level, but everybody can think about the excitement that it would be to bring a baby into the world, then to find out it's a boy, because if you were a Jewish person, if you were Hebrew, then to have a boy was really cool. Their culture, girls were fine, but to have a male was extra good. Okay, and so to find out, she had the baby and then it was a boy. And just imagine then finding out your baby is blind. I don't know if it was obvious from the point of birth or if it was something that they gradually were concerned about and found out within the first few months. Okay. But you just think about their life is my point. Like think about these parents and you think about the joy and the excitement and, oh my gosh, it's a boy. And then you think of the heartache that they would experience finding out that there was a birth defect, finding out that there was blindness. And if this child had been in our day and age, then very likely might not have even been brought into the world because of the rate of abortions that are taking place over potential birth defects. But anyways, you just think of them and they had lived their life under critical examination because it tells us, the scriptures tell us, let me read a little further. His parents replied, we know this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him. He is old enough to speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why they said he's an old enough, ask him. So you gain in verses 18 through 23, just those 7 verses or however many is there, you can gain a perspective of the parents. You can gain some understanding about them. They really feared people. They were people pleasers. They did not necessarily fear God. I do believe they lived under critical examination just because of how much emphasis was placed in that culture. So much emphasis was placed upon defects or issues or being born outside of a marriage covenant. Like there was so much scrutiny over things like this. And I do believe that they lived their life under critical examination. And so even if like, so yes, the blindness was given to the man, to the baby, and he had to live with it, but the parents had to live with it as well. And the parents have their own testimony of what it was like to have had their child be born into blindness and then to become a beggar. And so they had been affected. But this is just really important, like as parents, because like you've got to be behind your kids. People pleasing is an ugly thing. And it's something within us all. Like I do believe we all have it. It's just at varying degrees. Like there's seasons of my life too where it's not that big of a deal, and there's other seasons of my life where it is. As a whole, people pleasing has been an issue for me, and so you just think like you want to be behind your kids, and to think that you would even sacrifice that because you fear people is a really sad thing. And yet it's the day and age that we live in where children are not being backed. They don't feel safe. They don't feel like they have their parents' approval no matter what, because their parents are too busy trying to please other people. Jobs, for women just in America, like I'm all about women's rights. Like it's cool that we are equal and that we get to, whatever. But it's like we are not made the same as men, but we live in a world that is pushing such an agenda where women now they have to work even if they don't want to, because that's what we've created. And we've really taken moms out of the home, and we've messed up so much. But if your kids are watching you put other things above them, that's going to impact them. So if your children are watching you, make decisions or have answers or even shush them because you're afraid that they're going to, be annoying or whatever, like there's so much, then that's going to affect them, and that speaks loudly. Kids do pick up on that. So they've lived under critical examination, and it's evident the scriptures tell us why they respond, how they respond. They do confirm, yes, this is our son. Yes, he was born blind, but we don't know. They're afraid. They're just like, and they put it on the kid. They put it on the son, this man. Okay. And they say, just ask him. And they want to be out of the spotlight. So they had spent time in the spotlight, and it had not been in a favorable manner. And so that had affected them. So then they call the man in again who had been blind, and they told him, God should get the glory for this because we know this man, Jesus, is a sinner. Verse 25 now tells us for like the fourth time, the man's response. And he says, I don't know whether he is a sinner, the man replied, but I know this. I was blind, and now I can see. And God is using their questioning to refine this man's belief in Jesus. So it might feel like scrutiny, inspection, attacks on a miracle that just happened to you. Like you can imagine this miracle happening, and then you're just getting pummeled with questions. But really, it's a refinement, and God was using it to refine his belief and who he believed Jesus was. So he says, listen, all I know is that I was blind and now I see. What a sweet story. What a sweet testimony. And that's where we often start out is I'm getting to know Jesus. But all I know is that he's healing me. You know, I can see clearly now. I'm hearing truth and I'm responding to that. And that is the gist of what this man could say. Years down the line, I'm sure he could say a lot more. And he's going to have another interaction with Jesus that's going to even build upon his faith. Jesus is going to do follow up with him. And that's a sweet moment. And this guy's going to say, this man, he cared about me enough. He came back to me. So he's going to get to know Jesus. But in the beginning, he could say, all I could know is that I was blind and now I see. So they say, what did he do? How did he heal you? The man exclaims, I've told you once. Didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Then they cursed him. They said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from. Verse 30. Why, that's very strange, the man replied. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from. So this man is gaining boldness, and he's really coming to understand through their questioning just who Jesus is. He says, we know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he could not have done it. Verse 34, you were born a total sinner. The world wants you back. It wants to throw who you were back in your face. And that's what these Pharisees did to this man. He's exclaiming, he's like, this is what God does. Yes, this man is from the Lord. At first, he just says, I think he's a prophet. Remember, there's like, what do you think? What's your opinion? They were actually inquiring, what's your opinion? He said, well, I think he's a prophet. That's no longer what he's saying. He's saying he is from God. This persecution refined him, purified him. Listen, struggles are good for us, you guys. I don't know how you're viewing your current struggle. You've got to view it through the lens of the Lord. That's what this whole study has been about. You have to view it that way. And he's saying, and it will purify you. And not only will it purify you, it will help you see God clearly because you will see God's goodness. You will see God's character. And so, he ends up saying, this guy, like, this has never happened. He says, from the beginning of time, it's never been heard of. And he gets to be the one that God healed. And the world wants to throw it back on you. Like when they say you were born a total sinner, okay, that was a jab. You see the Pharisees, they do these jabs. They're just trying to insult, they're just trying to hurt you. And that was something that this guy had heard his whole life. And there are things that have kept you bound. There are feelings, there are thoughts, there are circumstances that have kept you bound in life. Okay. So, I mean, we don't have to go back over it again. We've named a lot of hurts and pains. And the enemy wants to throw them at you, especially when he's seen some freedom in your life or a chance of you coming out of that bondage, it can come at you. And so they throw this, they're like, you were born a total sinner. And that might have in that moment resonated with that man because he had been treated that way, but he doesn't. He disobeys that. And you've got to know what to disobey and what to obey. You have to obey the truth. You have to obey the Lord. You don't obey your feelings. You think you follow the truth, but you can disobey certain feelings. And so he doesn't bite. And they say, let's go to 35. When Jesus heard what happened, this is the sweetest thing. Oh, he gets thrown out of the synagogue. Sorry, I skipped that part. Are you trying to teach us? And they throw him out of the synagogue. This man gets kicked out of the synagogue for standing for Christ. And are you willing to be fired for Christ? Are you willing to be not liked? Are you willing to be not part of the cool group, the fun group? You know, are you willing to go through all of that for standing for Christ and being bold. When Jesus heard what happened, he found the man. The interaction of Jesus through this whole thing, Jesus initiated, Jesus saw him, Jesus initiated, Jesus hears what happens to him, and Jesus goes back and follows up with him. Okay. And he says, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And the man answered, "Who is he? I want to believe him." Imagine standing face to face. But remember, he didn't see Jesus's face. And then Jesus gets to say, "You have seen him, and he is speaking with you." So Jesus reveals himself to the man, says, "It was me," basically. Like I'm the one, like I'm the Son of Man. And he says, "Yes, Lord, I believe." And he worshiped Jesus. And Jesus told him, "I entered into this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think they see that they are blind." Pharisees are standing nearby and they heard him and they were like, "Are you saying we're blind?" And he says, "If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty." Sometimes it's our things in life that we were handed. We were just handed things in life. And it is those very things that have actually become a gift to us because they brought us to sight. They brought us to spiritual vision where we got to see the Lord. So stop viewing your past like you're a victim to it, like whatever, and you can be thankful. I can thank the Lord. That's crazy. I'm just grateful for things that I've been through, because if I hadn't had any pain in my life, I don't know that I would have sought the Lord. And while a lot of the pain in my life was brought about by my own hands, some of it wasn't. And yet, and it was all used to get me to seek the Lord. And so he says, if you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty. He says, but you remain guilty because you claim you can see, but you can't. They claimed to know it all. They claimed that they had the answers, that they were right, that Jesus was a sinner, that he didn't come from God, and they were blinded by their sin. And so that's where I'll end. It's just, so much is in here, but I'm sure everybody has had things that have happened to them. And maybe there's a few of you that are like, I had a great childhood. I actually did have a great, wonderful childhood with my parents were amazing. I did have those hardships that I talked to you guys about. You can even have had nothing, however, go wrong in your life. And you still have the call is the same for you to seek the Lord. And you can pick, to seek him with your whole heart, no matter what's gone on in your life. But for many of you that I do believe have had struggles, it's like we should be done. We're done viewing it like the poor me or the why did this happen, and just moving on to, okay, God, it did. And I'm going to stop questioning why. And what can you do, Lord? What can you do with it? Okay. Let me close in prayer.